In parts 1 and 2, we showed that software subscription costs are not ordinary expenses. They are quiet, recurring fees that compound over time and steadily erode long-term wealth and retirement savings. Because they arrive in small increments, they rarely trigger scrutiny, even as the cumulative damage grows. Part 3 moves from theory to evidence. Software subscriptions are fundamentally different from utilities, insurance, rent, leases, or service contracts. They persist by default, expand with little friction, and drift away from delivered value. That difference is why this section is split into two. Part 3A focuses on diagnosis, classifying subscriptions correctly, and showing where the money is actually going. Part 3B focuses on action, how professionals can identify, leverage, reduce exposure, and regain control. Part 4 addresses implementation and governance. Without clear ownership, review cadence, and decision rules, even successful cost reductions tend to reverse. Subscriptions rarely fail loudly. Their costs are diffuse and their impact delayed. By the time the problem is obvious, long-term financial damage has already occurred. The goal of this presentation is to make the software subscription trap visible early while corrective action is still possible and financial damage minimal. Not all recurring costs are the same, and software subscriptions are fundamentally different from every other category. Utilities, insurance, and service contracts are recurring, but they are visible, understandable, and usually tied to measurable value. Software subscriptions are not. Software subscriptions are insidious because they lack transparency. Costs are fragmented across vendors, spread across billing cycles, bundled with features that may not be used, and rarely presented in a way that shows cumulative impact. As a result, people continue paying without ever seeing the full picture of what they are agreeing to. This is why taxonomy matters. If software subscriptions are treated like ordinary recurring expenses, their growth goes unnoticed and unmanaged. Classification is the first control mechanism. Without it, every downstream analysis and every attempted fix is working with distorted information. People are used to recurring contracts, and most of them behave in predictable, transparent ways. Take something simple like garbage collection. You know what you're paying for, you know what happens if you stop paying, and if the service changes or the price goes up, it's visible and explicit. Utilities work the same way. You get a bill tied to usage, and if usage drops, costs drop. Maintenance contracts are similar. They are tied to a physical asset, and when that asset goes away, the contract usually goes away too. Software subscriptions are nothing like this. They don't stop when usage drops. They don't scale down naturally, and they don't present themselves as a single visible contract. They persist by default, expand quietly, and remain disconnected from clear value delivery. That's why lumping them together with ordinary recurring costs is such a costly mistake. Some recurring costs scale with delivered value, while others scale with friction, defaults, and inattention. Subscriptions are structurally different because they are designed to persist unless actively removed, which makes them uniquely prone to silent cost growth. Because these cost types behave differently, they require different oversight mechanisms. When subscriptions are misclassified as ordinary operating expenses, their growth becomes invisible. Classification is what allows us to see which costs will self-correct and which will not. Subscriptions feel small individually, which is why they rarely trigger scrutiny. But costs are fragmented across vendors, charged on different cycles, and buried in invoices that don't show cumulative impact. Analysis is necessary because intuition consistently underestimates the problem. This analysis is based on real payment data, credit card statements, vendor invoices, and license usage information. The goal is not accounting precision, but decision-grade insight, enough clarity to see patterns, drivers, and leverage points. Although there may be many subscriptions, spending is usually concentrated among a small number of vendors. This concentration is important because it tells us where optimization efforts will have the greatest impact, while the long tail explains why costs never seem to go away. The long tail consists of many small subscriptions that are rarely reviewed and hard to justify individually removing. By long-tail subscriptions, I mean the dozens or hundreds of small, low-cost tools that are individually easy to justify, rarely reviewed, and almost impossible to eliminate one by one, but which collectively form a permanent cost floor. Each one feels insignificant, but collectively they form a permanent cost floor that keeps totals elevated. When subscription costs are plotted over time, the pattern is clear. A steady upward trend with step increases at renewal points. Costs rise quickly, but almost never decline on their own because subscriptions accumulate rather than cycle. Annualizing monthly costs makes the growth unmistakable. This expansion often has little connection to revenue or headcount growth. Instead, it reflects structural inflation driven by renewals, seat creep, and pricing escalators. Breaking subscription spend into functional categories shows where the money is being allocated and where overlap is likely. Security, productivity, and cloud tools often dominate, but category boundaries frequently blur, masking redundancy. Not all categories grow at the same pace. Security subscriptions tend to grow fastest due to layered tooling and evolving threat models, while cloud costs often grow quietly through usage-based pricing. License counts often grow faster than headcount. Seats are easy to add and rarely reclaimed, which means costs persist even when staffing stabilizes or contracts. Usage data consistently shows underutilization. Many licenses are paid for, but rarely used, and some see less than half of seats actively engaged. This gap represents direct, addressable waste. Cost per active user normalizes spending and exposes inefficiencies that total cost hides. High cost combined with low usage is a clear signal for renegotiation, consolidation, or elimination. When renewals cluster in the same time period, negotiation leverage is reduced and auto-renewals become more likely. Timing alone can lock in unnecessary costs before anyone realizes it. Subscription systems are asymmetric by design. Adding tools is easy. Removing them requires attention, coordination, and often internal friction. Defaults favor continuation, not optimization. The evidence shows three consistent patterns. Subscription costs compound, utilization is uneven, and governance mechanisms are weak or absent. These outcomes are systemic, not accidental. Part 3A diagnosed the problem. In Part 3B, we shift from analysis to action by prioritizing opportunities, quantifying savings, and defining a practical execution plan to regain control of subscription costs. This is Phil Myers of PEMI Consulting. Thank you, and we will see you in Part 3B.